Welcome to the Australian Slacklining Association Access Series podcast, episode 2. This week we have Lori Modde here with us, the CEO of Outdoors New South Wales and ACT. If you haven't heard episode 1, go check out the chat we had with Australian Climbing Association Queensland President Peter Martland and the lessons learned and what's been learned from the last 20 years of fighting for access in Queensland. So, we're excited to talk to Lori. Why are we excited to talk to Lori? Well, in her role as CEO of Outdoors New South Wales and ACT, she gets to speak to governments and land managers and has a good understanding, because she's spending time speaking with them, of what they care about, what concerns them, using their national parks, etc., what things are going to help our path forward for access. And so, we're excited to talk to her and get some of her knowledge so that we can all keep slacklining and highlining in the places we love. So, firstly, Laurie, why does an organisation like Outdoor New South Wales and ACT exist?
Good question. That's a good one to start off with there, Dan. Okay. So, and hi everyone. Thanks for having me on. I suppose the first thing to realise is that we are a peak body. It's known as a peak body, and I think that sort of the framing of a peak body is to ensure that it has a collective of voice for a purpose of good across its membership. Now, it's clear to see from our purpose that we have highlighted that anyone who connects with nature gets health and wellbeing outcomes. So we always say what we're trying to do is get more of the community connecting with nature to provide that health and wellbeing outcome. So an organisation like us looks at supporting anyone that wants to do that. And that includes working with organisations and people that can facilitate that happening. So, look, I think the needless to say, anything like a peak body or an association, it's about combined voice and combined effort. So you can consider it like an economies of scale where, the efforts are done once, but for multiple different people. And that's really where the power of associations come from, and organisations like ourselves. So, anything that relates to getting people outdoors, you can pretty much say that I'll make sure that, Outdoors New South Wales and ACT has a hand in that in some way to make sure that there's better outcomes for people.
Yeah, it's I was reading that in your bio, and also your background was in tourism, which was somewhat similar in that it's getting people into the outdoors and so forth.
Absolutely. Yeah, look, my history is quite diverse. I think the commonality, if you like, is around community and economic development. And of course, with the economic development side, there's a high tourism focus in the positions that I've held. But over the years, I've done a lot with not-for-profits and associations. I've been lucky enough to work in government too, and that has been a crucial element to supporting my knowledge and expertise in how to use that for our benefit as well. And I don't mean that in a negative way. By understanding how the mechanics of government work is crucial in making sure you have those opportunities presented to enforce policy change and how to go about that.
Yeah, so that's very much what I'm interested in, because I guess I've done a permit application in the past to council to be allowed to slackline, or to national parks to be allowed to have a highline gathering, and they've been denied. And it's quite frustrating because I feel quite clueless as to why, not understanding the mechanics of how government work. It's like, it just makes you sort of a bit upset and angry, but it's like, how do you, what do we actually do about it? So I guess joining...
Absolutely.
Starting at peak body, I guess, was the first step for Australian slacklining, and then working with you guys, who have been a great friend to us, is another step forward, I guess, in that space.
Absolutely. Look, knowledge is power in anything that we do. So understanding the systems and the processes that not just local but state and federal government work by is incredibly important, and that's something that I bring to the table in my role, so that we can maximise, the opportunities for all of our members. And credit to ASA for coming on and being a member and seeing that opportunity, because I can only help those that come on board, and it's really important that we build that voice, because and I don't want to sort of bring up the controversial things too early in the discussion, but I'll bring up one. And I think you mentioned that you formed a body, which I think is great because you've got common purpose. But I will say it's not the solution for everyone. And we've got to be very careful that we don't have too many peak bodies out there for different courses of action, because that can also work to our detriment. It's really important that we try to first work with those that are already in the space, because I think the only people that have really benefited from the huge growth of not-for-profits over the years have been the government in registration fees and the audit fees and so forth. And it's not sustainable, because every organisation, every not-for-profit entity requires a lot of effort to keep in the marketplace. So, I think it's great you've set up your peak body, because you're very structured in, it's very much about slacklining. I think that's great. But for anyone else out there, please don't think that setting up a peak body is the next thing to do if you're having issues. The first thing you should do is contact those that are already in discussion with the people that you want to talk to. Jump on board and get involved, as has ASA with us. And I think that's a perfect solution, because we can't stretch our resources too thinly, because we as an industry don't have too many resources to share.
Yeah, so is the outdoor industry in general, like, how does it sit with government? Do they see it as a lot of people, not that many people, important, not that important to them?
Depends on who you talk to. And I'll probably say that a lot in this podcast, unfortunately, because it is the truth. It depends on how connected they are to our work. And look, generically, I have to say that we're very unknown. We still struggle every day. If I use the term, people don't know what they don't know, once in a week, I'd probably use it 10 times in a week, because it's one of those things that we're getting into spaces that we haven't been before as an industry. And it's that education process that does take time. If you look at our careers and our shortages of staff at the moment, we're entering into spaces to communicate that our careers are an option for people. And continually schools are saying, what roles are there? So we're really starting from a low base as the outdoor industry per se. They understand the tourism side, they understand a bit of the education side, but when we sort of round it up and say, we're part of the outdoor industry, we're very much unknown. So we do have a lot of work to do, and that's a big reason why we need that power of voice and our membership to grow, so we can continue those sorts of efforts.
Yeah, so tourism seems like it's had a lot of growth and it's got a very strong voice now, but outdoor recreation in comparison, especially, there's a stat that there's 30,000 rock climbers or something in Queensland, but they seem to still have relatively low traction, I feel like, and because of the user group doesn't seem that big, and Slackline, we're even smaller, so it's
exactly.
It seemed like we're kind of like quite a small voice, I guess. So do we figure out how to maximize our voice, or what are the things to do?
It's not necessarily, in the numbers of participants or that type of thing. I think where the power of an industry or a sector comes in is its connectivity to community. And if I look at what the tourism industry was 20 years ago, I'd actually reflect and say, wow, we're probably sitting at the same spot for the outdoor industry today that tourism was 20 years ago. So, it has to be around a lot of education for sure. But what we do not do well in this industry, and it's on my to-do list every day, is data. We do not do data well. We don't collect data. So at the beginning of next year, we will be circulating a very, very important survey out to the industry and that's the industry as a whole. So recreators, educators, tourism operators, anyone that works in a dependent-led nature in the outdoors or an independent activity that's recreation-based, we ask you to fill out that and provide us the data, because that's the data that we're going to be using as we start educating people about the volume of what happens in the outdoors. And as I say, it's not necessarily the number of people, but, what are the outcomes of that activity? How are people saving on healthcare costs by being outdoors? How are they having a mental health relief by being outdoors? It's all that type of data that we really, really struggle with as an industry, so that we can put the right stats in front of the right people so that we get attention.
Yeah, so I had a marketing business for a while and worked in some tourism, and they were very good at saying this tourism has brought 1 million visitors to the region, and that's the impact of that has been $1 million in business to the local area. So you're saying with the outdoor industry, we don't really have the stats to say, well, we had 100 people come slacklining every day, and that generated an impact in reduced mental health issues or better physical well-being.
Correct. And look, the terminology and what we use and the data that we need will also vary depending on the stakeholders that we're talking to, because every stakeholder we have is quite different in what it's trying to achieve with a connection to us, or vice versa. So it's very important that we get a collection of data right across all different, and I say that we've got 4 different sectors in the outdoor industry. As you say, we've got our active recreation, which is like yourselves. We've got outdoor education. There's a component of yourself in that as well. And then there's the adventure tourism side, which, we'll probably get to the stage where we'll start having more adventurous tourism opportunities associated with your activity. And then there's the nature therapy aspect. Now, that is the one that's probably growing the fastest, and that is because that we're starting to see psychologists enter our place, enter our market, to connect people with nature, to look at trying to combat adverse mental health and different other health and well-being challenges that they might see, including disability. Getting people out into nature if they have a disability has proven results on many different research papers. So it's that growth of seeing that, the therapy side is a great way to connect people with nature as well. So the 4 areas that we've got to look at, adds complexity to that data, but, it's very important that at least we start collecting some data in some way so that we can start having the right discussions.
Yeah, it seems crazy as we see negative physical health, negative mental health sort of reported in the media. Governments sort of throw money at these things. We slackline, we walk, we bushwalk, we do whatever in the outdoors, and we know personally that it's so important for the soul, it's so important for our mental and physical health. It seems mad that we have to actually collect the data and take it and sit around a table and plonk it on the table to prove it. Like, it seems crazy, but that's what has to be done.
How else do they get it? Exactly. Yeah. And, we know the activity's the best. So, it's not going to be, create it and they will come. It's getting that data, using it strategically for our benefits and our outcomes, and then starting the discussion with the right people. That's what gets traction. It's not just, collecting the data and letting it happen. That's for sure. There's a lot of work to do after it.
Because I guess we tend to live in our own bubble a little bit. Everyone around us knows time in the outdoors is great. We feel time in the outdoors is great. And you forget that other people don't realise that and don't realise the benefits as deeply.
Exactly. Yep. And that's right. And that's another aspect of what we advocate for too, is connecting more people with the outdoors that don't understand the benefits, and having that opportunity where we connect people that would like to do your activity or some, other activities in the outdoors, because the healthier we are as a community, the better off we all are. So we've got to get more people out and appreciating nature. It's also because of that sustainability effort as well. By educating people of nature and connecting them with it, it has more opportunity to ensure that it's protected into the future. So yeah, things like just participating in nature, you start realizing the importance of it.
Yeah, it seems crazy that another thing that frustrates me is we might be denied access to a certain area to protect the environment.
Mm.
And I think, gee, by getting those people out in the environment, half of them turn into blooming vegetarians because they think it's better for the environment. And like
Mm.
they become so caring about the environment the more time they spend outdoors.
Mm.
Yet occasionally
Mm.
we get restricted from a space because we're trying to protect the environment. But in my mind, we'd be far
Mm.
better off letting people use the environment. When they go back home, they probably drive their
Mm.
cars less, use less fossil fuels, do whatever is good for the environment when they get home in the city.
Mm.
So
Yep, that's it. Look, and it's again, you don't know what you don't know, and I think it's a very easy solution for a lot of people to go, oh, protect, close up. I think it's taking people on a bit of a journey of our understanding as we start to educate more people on it. And I think you can't just carte blanche say access for all. What we've got to do is having a look at their objectives. What are their concerns? What are the things that is making them think, let's just close it up? Because the
yeah,
more we can understand where their headspace is at and their decision-making process, the more likely we will have a way to connect our thinking. There is no point going, we demand access, we want, to have free reign of this area because we love connecting with nature and it's better for our health. That's very me, 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 me. Doing anything in partnership, which is exactly what this is like, you've got to come in with mutual ground and you've got to understand where they sit, where their issues are, where their opportunities are, and what success looks like for them. And I can tell you, success for them is not just kicking us off their land. Success for them is probably something very, very different and meeting a different objective. It's just that's their way of getting to that objective. So we've got to find out what's triggering that and then have those discussions with them to work out where a partnership lies. You've got to treat it like a partnership and put a visual in there for you. A partnership is a seesaw that's well balanced. No one's on the ground, no one's in the air. It is perfectly flat line. And that's where benefits on both sides really, really do come to fruition.
and so for a new organisation like us, like what are we typically a bit clueless at when a new organisation joins and starts taking part in these discussions? What are we typically clueless about compared to what does the government or the land manager or the people that were sitting around the table, what do they care about that we didn't realise they cared about?
Look, I think first and foremost, the key is to know how they work as an organisation, as an entity, as a government authority, because then you start working out what processes are in place where you can be involved. Second of all, yes, there's going to be a lot of different objectives, which are budgetary. There would be risk, huge look at risk, and that doesn't necessarily mean of your health and safety and risk, but risk in general. What's the risk to you know increasing access? What's the risk to financial? What's the risk to political? If you look at the typical PESTLE analysis of external environment, there's risks associated with every single one of those letters: political, economic, environment, social, technology, legal, ethics. So they're going to look at all of those different aspects and go, okay, there's risks associated along all of those different areas. And what is our action to mitigate that risk? So don't think risk is just safety. That's social. That's one letter of your whole systematic look. Whereas we've got to look at okay, what is their framework? What's their processes? What are they looking at as a win, a gain, a great outcome, and how can you help them get there? Because it doesn't necessarily mean that their gain is purely to our detriment. It could be done together, and I think that knowledge is incredibly important as people navigate their way through this.
And so, in terms of managing that risk, is that why they create management plans? Like there's a draft management came out for the Blue Mountains. Is that what that purpose of that document is, or why do they have these
Absolutely.
things?
Yeah. Look, it's legislation. They have to.
Yep.
At the end of the day, they've got to create management plans, and what that does, it puts a framework around what the management authority can work within. And so once it's in a plan of management, it's very hard to change that. So that's why, as a public participation requirement, they must go out and engage with the community on that framework. To get the input so things aren't missed in that opportunity. But yeah, plans of management are incredibly, incredibly important because it does set a framework for anything that can happen or not happen in an environment.
So
And that
why?
goes for local councils as well, of course.
So why was it better for? Why were slacklining aiming to be included in the draft management plan, saying than being excluded and kind of flying under the radar? Like, why was it a good step to try and be included in there?
Because it provides that framework of access. So if it wasn't mentioned in there, it'd be very easy for it to be told it's not in the plan of management, you cannot do the activity. It'd be even worse if it said this is not a permitted activity. So what we've got to make sure is that, we open up the opportunities to have the discussions to see it as a legitimate activity, but included in a frame that won't be knocked out of the park. Included is the key.
Yeah, okay. So effectively, the default, if you're not in there, the default can be you're not allowed.
It can be absolutely that, yeah. It sometimes will be up to the interpretation of the officers, but very quickly that would probably be the first thing that's considered because it's just too hard, too hard to inbuild into what's currently there.
And so I think in the draft management plan, slacklining needed a permit or wording something around there. So does that mean we missed something, I guess, in those discussions? We didn't quite understand what their concerns or their risks were enough for them to put a kind of a permit thing on it, or what happened there,
No,
or we're
not
not sure yet?
necessarily. Yeah, look, what we did get was a step forward. And I think until we get the data on a lot of the activity, it's very hard for an organisation like National Parks and Wildlife to see the value of going to the next step. But that's obviously why we commented on the draft as well, to say that it's incredibly important as an activity that is growing, that we keep an eye on this and ensure that we work better together. So look, it is a step forward. Don't see it as a not a win, because it certainly was a win to have it in there. But yes, there is some areas that we've got to continually work at improving. And I think to a degree, it's a lot about that education. Even in any activity, right across the outdoors, I'm consistently educated on. Even just the value of outdoor education, I'm educating people on. It's very easy for the school system to say there's too much in the curriculum, we can't have that as well. So what I'm there saying is, well, here's all the benefits, here's all the outcomes. It's proven in here, and here about those benefits to kids. This is not a and or option. This is must include option because of these benefits. And that's what we've got to get to. We've got to get to having those sorts of conversations. But again, not walking in with a mind frame of not understanding their position. That's certainly from my learnings, that's not how a good partnership starts.
So yeah, it's not enough to sort of say we want to do this activity because it's fun in the outdoors. What's going to help is it's fun in the outdoors, plus it's been proven to help with mental health, help with social interactions, community, etc.
Exactly. And I must stress that, and this is something that I'm sure ASA are looking at, but what's really important is that the industry as a whole and everyone involved in that activity understands the importance of what they're looking at to stop this activity from happening. And I'll use safety in this example, right? Say, for example, you're landlocked because they went, oh my God, highlining, that's so dangerous, people could die. And then, the first thing they go to is a social media post that has someone highlining, mucking around, probably not the best rig, doesn't have, maybe the safest practices on show in that image, then that's going to be hugely detrimental to the work of ASA. So ensuring that, every single one of your members and the community as a whole understands the importance of a code of practice and ensuring that everything that we advocate for people understand to follow certain guidelines and certain practices and principles to ensure that we combat some of those arguments. I'll use another example. We've been working a lot in the insurance space. And I had a client, not a non-member, come to me and say couldn't get insurance. So I went immediately onto their Facebook page and I said, well, can I suggest that you have a look at your processes and procedures? To which they said, oh, no, they're meticulous, they're perfect. And I said, well, you better explain that to this leader who's on this photo, who's not wearing a helmet at height and doesn't have a safety line attached. Because I can tell you that's exactly what the insurer would have looked at, and that's probably why you can't get insurance. So, it's examples like that where we've got to get more knowledge out there about how we look in the marketplace. Social media is a big one. We have a lot of issues with, the look and appeal of safety when it comes to just some little images that appear on socials that could be used for forever and a day.
So someone at an insurance company or someone at national parks would actually go onto the social media and see if they were happy with what they were seeing.
Absolutely, Dan. Yes, it's their land. So, they want to make sure that everything that is happening on their land is of a safe and a good practice. So, if they're spotting, people out there not doing the right thing with that activity, unfortunately, the whole activity gets branded with that. As does, that organisation. It was one leader, but the whole organisation was branded with not insurable, not following the right procedures when it comes to things like the AAAS or the good practice guides.
So that's an interesting point that it's their land, because occasionally I guess we forget that. We just go enjoy the outdoors, we forget whose land it is, and it's been allocated to that organisation to manage and own.
Absolutely. And that's what I mean about putting yourself in the shoes of the person you're talking to or wanting to talk to. You've got to think, what are the pressures on them? And, national parks is a great example. National parks, have, I'll use the instance down in Southern Highlands, not that long ago. Unfortunately, there was a canyoner who fell to his death. Now, not only have the national park staff got to go through that process of, well, how did this happen? How do we stop this from happening again? But then, what do they do in management of that whole area going forward? So it's not just incidents either. How do they manage floods and fires and, access accordingly? It's a massive undertaking to look at these public lands and manage them so that they can be accessed, but also conserved. And you've got to remember that the National Parks and Wildlife Service originally was established to conserve. So, we're just very lucky that they've moved into a place where, they want more access to the national parks so that we can continue to educate. And they realise that with the Kosciuszko plan of management not that long ago, which we were talking to them about, the wilderness areas used to be totally off limits to all eco-pass holders. And through working and discussing with them, they actually came back to us and said, we're going to permit eco-pass holders into the wilderness areas because, one, we know that eco-pass holders follow our rules, and two, they lead people out into these areas to educate. So the more we're educating people on these wilderness areas, the more, again, as we said, they're going to preserve and see the value of that preservation.
So are we coming from a default position then with the parks of originally being set aside for wilderness sort of to preserve, I guess? So we're coming from a default position of not necessarily being able to drill holes in cliffs and put bolts in and abseil and rock climb and highline and these sorts of things. So have we done kind of well to get any access at this point? Or?
Oh, look, we have, absolutely. But look, as I say, the mental shift of national parks has changed over decades, and there is a tourism department, within national parks, so they understand the value of getting people into the parks now. So I think we've moved on from just preservation, but there are areas that we know are very fragile and very much in need of preservation for future generations to come. So we've got to work with them and understand that so that, we can start to recommend how we as users could help them in that protection as well.
Because people there's a thing around the commodification of national parks as being a negative. But I guess what we're seeing is national parks are being used for tourism, which is commodification. They're making dollars. But as part of that, we're also being allowed to use national parks for recreation. So it's
Exactly.
kind of, we're getting both, I guess.
Yeah, look, and there's a gentle balance there, and I know National Parks and Wildlife, particularly in New South Wales, are very conscious of that. There have been some developments which have been sort of probably a little bit too far, but that being said, if there is investment into parks to continue good work in other areas, that's a positive thing. But what we've got to make sure is, as an advocacy and a lobbying group, that they don't go that extra step too far and turn it into a Disney World. We want to really protect the environment aspect and then continue doing what we do, which is connecting people for health and well-being. That's what it's all about.
And so, yeah, connecting people with health and well-being. What made you think when Australian Slacklining joined Outdoor New South Wales and ACT that it was an appropriate or a good thing, or it was good for health and mental? What made you think that? What concerned you, I guess, or in what process did you sort of go through to realise that it's maybe not a reckless sport? What were your first impressions versus, what were your impressions now?
Yep. Well, first thing, I had to educate myself as much as, anyone else that interacts with something new needs to do. And I was pleased that, your team, who I worked with in the very early days, were prepared to help me with that and understanding that. But very quickly, I saw it as just another activity that connects people to nature. And like I said before, our purpose is getting more people connected to nature so that they do have mental health, well-being outcomes. And that includes everything, even to trail bike riding. There are a lot of men out there that are suffering isolation and challenges. And their trail bike riding is that opportunity to instill a better mental health in themselves. So, and there's also a lot of women out there doing that as well. So it's like that. It's pretty much an activity that I saw, whether it be slacklining or highlining, that people enjoyed, and they knew that the benefits of that were helping themselves as individuals. So, any activity right across in the outdoors that does that, we will support. And that's because, we're here to help people and get enjoyment from the outdoors and get that health benefit as well.
And so with highlining, what were the things that need to happen, I guess, to show that it's a good sport for health and well-being? Is it showing community? Is it showing that it's safe? Is it showing that I'm not
It's
sure.
It's definitely multifaceted. And look, I urge everyone not to jump straight into the safety aspect straight away. As I said before, a lot of it's around data collection and starting that real underlying case of how big is this activity. And then it's looking at all the different things. And as I say, depending on the stakeholder, what comes to mind for them is the answers you've got to have ready. So if it's a council and, they've closed access for a particular reason, find out what that reason is, and then start building what you have as an activity to counteract that. And that's when you can start having those discussions. But again, I'll go back to a comment I said earlier. It's finding out what was the aim in the first place. And like I said, it's probably not just closing off land access. How did that come about as a method to get to the aim?
Yeah, so when you put it like that, I guess it's not that complicated. It's like, well, we've been restricted in this space. Why did you guys restrict this? What was your concern? All right, there's a concern. Let's go away and think about how we counteract that, or how we show that that's not as much of a concern as they believe it to be.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And it's coming up with those responses, and it's not, it's not coming back with a what's the table tennis sort of response, hit. It is basically sitting down and say, okay, I understand your objectives are this. I understand your aims are this. Here's what we do, and this is why we do what we do. Now, where is the common ground here, and how do we come up with a solution that we both win out of this? It's really what the whole aim of lobbying and advocacy is all about.
And I've sat in some of those meetings, and I guess talking to this because at ASA we want more people to be involved in the land access discussions on subcommittees, I guess, to access. And really, it's not that complicated. You just kind of go to a meeting. They're generally pretty friendly. You sit down, you say, we love Slackline, and they're like, oh, cool. And then you're like, well, we've got this issue, and they're like, oh, okay, all right. Well, yeah, I'm not actually sorry about that, but I'll go away and find out about it. Can you guys send me this information, or can you do this, and then we'll have another meeting, and then it isn't fast, the process. By all
No,
means.
it's definitely not fast. And again, it's understanding how the mechanics work is really, really important as well. You know, you use the example of plans and management. You know, they could be everywhere from a year to more by the time they're drafted, by the time they go on an exhibition, by the time they come back on a final draft, and before they get accepted. So it does take a long time, some of these things, but there are reasons for that. And that's why understanding the processes of government really helps, because you don't want to miss any of those opportunities because of that delay as well.
No, and the other point to that is it's quite likely you'll find friends amongst government when you do these things, because some of them you might meet might be climbers or slackliners or avid bushwalkers, or they see your passion and they're quite happy to work with you, but they have their own rules to follow internally. They have their own things to satisfy.
Exactly, and that's why it's really important to find out what those rules are, because you can help in that discussion as opposed to just giving them the problem and them coming back with a solution. You know, as someone who's managed many big teams over the years in my career, you know, I used to say to my staff, never come to me with a problem, come to me with a problem and a solution, or a couple of solutions. Because, you know, it's quicker, but also you know that that's being considered and thought through the process of what that solution is, as opposed to just throwing something in the air and going, okay, how are we going to fix this? So come with solutions as well as the problem. Don't go in saying we want more access. Tell them what that access can look like. That's the important part.
Yeah, an example of that, I had a meeting with Adelaide City Council arborists the other day about a performance down there, and at the start of the conversation they were like, oh, well, can you give a bit of a background on what you do? And I was like, well, I actually prepared a little slideshow. here's a photo, here's another photo showing how safe it is, here's another photo of us on a tree, here's another photo showing of all the gear we use to protect the tree, here's another here's another slide showing all the procedures we follow and the code of conduct and the International Slackline Association stuff. That took a couple of minutes, and the guy, that's all solutions. The guy was like, oh, okay, all right, well, you guys are sorted. I can see you look after the trees. I can see you do that. All we need to do is find a suitable space, and I'm happy to work with you and say yes.
Yeah, beautiful. And then if you, on top of that, if you can then turn around and say, and all of our members have signed off that they follow these practices when they join us, how good would that be?
Yeah, so that's where a code of conduct. That's why we have a code of conduct then, is that right?
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, because you know that they've signed something to say that they will follow those practices. So if they're ever caught on social media, you then have the opportunity to, one, request them to remove it, or, you know, give them some sort of idea of why that's so important. And yeah, it's not going to be a good reputational outcome for the whole of the slacklining community if they do that.
Yeah, so we want our members to, as part of joining the community of Australian slacklining, to say, we agree to acting in this way that's positive to slacklining and also prevents the negative to slacklining, because the code of conduct is about showing the good things, but it's also about preventing the things that when you sit down in the meeting with the person that's probably trying to go into bat for you with your bosses, it's the thing that you're making sure the members avoid, so you don't look them bad, make them
That's
bad.
right. Yeah, it's communicating your values. You know, that's as simple as that. It's saying, right, this is what we value as a community and what we stand for.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So very much, okay, that underlying values. And so why is number of members important then? So we do want more more members is good, is that right?
Look, it's one of those things that the power of a voice is because of the people behind it. So absolutely, we want more members to become part of your community if they're slacklining, and we want more members to become part of us as an outdoors community, because the more people we have behind us, the louder the voice becomes, but also the opportunities of what that brings. Now, my basic individual membership is only $25, but at a business level, it starts at $500. Now, what that does for me is the power of many behind us enables me to put on another person to do more advocacy, or it provides more opportunities for us to be at different tables and different seats for discussions around policy. So, if we don't grow our membership, we will stay stagnant in the efforts that we're making. So it's incredibly important that people see us as similar to, you don't know a doctor that is not part of the Australian Medical Association. You don't know an engineer that's not part of the Australian Engineers Association. So, this is your peak body. If you want to do more in the outdoors and you're concerned about different things in your environment, or you want to have more benefits in this space, it needs to be recognised. And I suppose this is why I look back 20 years in tourism, is it was very hard for tourism operators to see the value of why they've got to be part of their peak bodies. And that has changed over those 20 years. People seeing those benefits. And I think that's where we are now. People need to see the value of joining their peak body, because it's incredibly important in that voice, but also benefits that you get across the board. Access to news, and every one of my members gets a weekly newsletter with some very important information that we see as Outdoors New South Wales ACT as being important for them, as well as membership offers and programs and events and all the other things that come with membership. But the portal for me is certainly the best business outcome. The membership outcome, because they can have their own portal where they get access to anything they want on demand that relates to their activity. And that could be everything from, templates of letters right through to research articles, through to all different sorts of things. There's over 300 pages of content in their membership portal. So building content like that, people see that, it's not just the voice, but they're getting benefits as well. So for ASA, think about, we definitely need the voice, get people behind you on the voice of slacklining and highlining, but what else can you help them with? So it's going in with a very much of a partnership level as well.
Yeah, for sure. And ASA, we do partner with a couple of organisations that sell gear and offer discounts there.
Perfect.
Yeah, and so when you sit down at these meetings, they ask how many members. Is that one of the questions they ask?
Yes, a lot of the time, yes. And obviously I would always put it in perspective too, because the number of members might be large, but when we're talking about a particular area, or a different topic of discussion, I keep bringing it back to that topic and that relation, because, I don't want there to be miscommunication and misunderstanding in anything that I sit with stakeholders on. You've got to be very clear about, okay, well, this is actually worth 45% of our market, or whatever the case may be. Data, as I say, data is really key when it comes to these discussions.
And social media members, they count a little bit, but financial members would count more, am I thinking? Or
Oh yes, social media members do not count.
okay.
When it comes to these discussions in policy, you can say I have 1 million followers on TikTok. They don't care. This is about the members, the people that are supporting your initiatives, your brand, your values, that are pulling out money in their pocket to support it. That's what they're looking for, is those who are investing in the benefits of this particular industry.
And what about understanding other user groups? Like, I wonder, in terms of the data we need to collect and the data that's helpful, I think we've been rejected for an activity saying it affects the visual amenity of the place because we're highlining near a lookout and people have come to take a photo of the lookout, I guess, and there's a highline there, which I can understand. But when I go talk to all the people that come to the lookout, because I always try and advocate for the sport and I want to run over there and make sure they know we've got a safety harness, number one. Number two,
Yes.
make sure we tell them we know what we're doing and we're not reckless. So, I remember we got told to take a line down by a water board and the police one time, and I'm thinking, well, they think we're reckless, understandable. I couldn't talk to them because they were 40 metres below. They were just yelling at me. But in the group, we had like I'm trained in vertical rope rescue and mines. We had an international rope access technician. We had a commercial rigger. We had so much experience in the group. I thought if someone gets hurt somewhere else, we'll be the ones having to rescue them anyway.
Yes, exactly.
But obviously there's some education to do there. And so is that one of the things that we should be sort of surveying other user groups to see the effect of slacklining on them to make sure that doesn't impact them, or we can show the data to show, hey, we're not making people not enjoy the national park because we're having fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think the first thing you should do in any case like that, any instance like that you have, say the police and the water board, for example, is to sit down and brainstorm with your executive or, whoever and say, right, how did this go wrong? What could we have done differently to have a better outcome? And, even I don't know what the process of why the police and the water board were there, but, look at that, say, right, if we had applied for a permit to do this, would that have been different? Should we collect data that is available at a particular spot? I don't know. You've got to think about, okay, well, how did this come about? How do we want it to change, and what would influence that change? That's the process you've got to think about as you go through each of these different scenarios. Your point on talking to the people at the lookout is a very valid one. The more you can collect some of that data and get some of your volunteers to run around lookouts and say, if you actually saw a highliner on this lookout while you're here, how would that impact your visitation? And they'd go, oh, that'd be cool. Something like that. If you start collecting that sort of data and then feeding that back to national parks or whoever the landowner is or whoever your stakeholders that are negative about the approach are, then you're going to have, again, we've talked a couple of times on it, but data. It's having the data that helps you achieve what you're aiming to achieve.
Yeah, that would probably be an easy one for us to set up too. And it would be interesting insight for ourselves to know,
Absolutely.
What annoys them. Did we have music that annoyed them, or were they happy with everything, or
And look, that's the thing. And then they might come up with some negatives, but at least you know about it. And then you can look at, well, how do we turn that around? How do we look at the negatives and not do that? Or, what can we do in that space?
Yeah, because the being shut down at the water authority example is someone's been water skiing around that place, saw us, and decided that it was in the interests of whoever to report that these people were doing this activity and maybe they shouldn't be. So there was obviously a thought process in that person's head that this was reckless or shouldn't be allowed here or whatever. So there's some understanding, I guess, to figure out there, to figure out the next steps.
Absolutely. So knowing, what that process was is halfway to fixing the problem.
Yeah. And in that case, we haven't, it's on the to-do list, I guess. It's something we need to do. We didn't follow it up. We didn't go and ask, well, why would we shut down? We haven't done the permit because it's one of those areas where it's not a permitted activity, but it's not a not permitted activity, I guess. So it's in the grey area, which often defaults to the not allowed.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't take this personally, but, that's a great frame for now escalating the problem further by not following up on that. Because what that's done is validated your pulling down.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
So they're seeing that as, well, they obviously agree they shouldn't have been doing it because they took it down without coming back to us and say, why is it going down?
Exactly.
Okay. So not questioning post having an access issue or being told to take it down is actually going to be a bad thing for us.
Correct. It escalates the problem because then, the people in the authority position went, okay, well, they obviously knew that they were doing wrong because, they pulled it down and haven't heard from them. So, and then it's to the next time they're going to see another highliner and go, hold on a second.
Get rid of them again. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So there's some work to do there for follow-up for access issues and say, hey, we were doing what we believe is a legitimate activity. We want to understand why you'd asked us to take it down.
Correct. Exactly. And can we have a discussion about how we make sure that, our recreators are not disadvantaged next time?
Yeah, okay. Which I guess to me sounds like work, but are we saying that the work's going to have an effect? Are we saying that the work's worth it? Are we saying that we can get a result?
It's going to be more work if you don't.
Okay.
It's going to be more work if you don't start doing these things as they happen. It's like, filing. You know yourself with tax time. If you've done the filing every month or every week, at the end of the year, you won't have to sort through all of that paperwork to get your tax done. It's very similar with these types of things. Act on it as they happen, because it's only more work at the end of the day.
So in that scenario, we get shut down, we don't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
In their head, it goes, well, that means they knew they were doing the wrong thing. We do it again,
Correct.
we
And
get
how many
shut down
people did they
again.
tell? Exactly. How many
Yeah.
people did that authoritarian tell and say, next time you see a highliner, make sure they come down? Because it was verified in his head or her head that by you pulling it down, it was the right thing for them to do.
Wow.
Mm.
I think that's the best thing, the most insightful thing, I guess, we've picked up so far, or the most valuable thing, in that, we do have to act on these access issues, because otherwise we get shut down again, and then it gets written into some policy that it's reckless and dangerous and don't let it happen, and then you've got to unwrite it, I guess, which is harder than...
Exactly. That's exactly right. And, one thing I hope that I always bring to the table is always being present. If you're not present and if you're not at the tables, then you don't get the opportunities that can be presented.
And I guess also it's going to get shared that those guys were doing something reckless. Everyone believes they were doing something reckless. So all of a sudden you've got 20 people in that organisation that think it's reckless because they haven't been told differently. Because we went there to say, well, actually, it's safer than mountain biking, for example.
That's exactly right. Mm.
Yeah, okay. I'm seeing the importance more and more now.
Awesome. Glad I could help.
Yeah, wow. I didn't realize the conversations post getting asked to take something down were so important.
Exactly. Yeah. And look, can I stress that I keep hearing, how can I convince XYZ of whatever? The word convince needs to be removed from all of our vocabulary. We're not there to convince anyone. Convincing means to sway someone's opinion to your side. What we're trying to achieve here is a mutual partnership, and by that we educate and involve. That's what we need to start doing more of, as opposed to convincing, because convincing comes across as quite a negative outcome because you're changing sides. It's about going in with a partnership, working together to educate and inform, but for benefit on both sides.
Yeah, I guess convinced sounds a little bit like they're wrong and I'm right. I've just got to make them believe that. Okay.
Correct. They've got very legitimate reasons for whatever they did, but you've also got legitimate reasons for your side too. So it's trying to find that balance and coming out with a better outcome that you both would be satisfied with. Sometimes that means compromise on both sides.
Yeah. So, and do we have a legitimate right, I guess, is the first question to be used in the space. And
absolutely.
Is it worth fighting for? I mean, is there a chance of getting successes, I guess?
It depends on the stakeholder. It just depends on their objectives. So, again, you've got to work out, or if it is a negative outcome for you, why? What was the aim? All of that type of thing, and start working towards some sort of mutual benefit. Each scenario will be very, very differently from one another, but you've just got to start there. Work out, the one side, why they did what they did, and then come together.
Yeah. And so, I mean, have you got success stories in that space to share, or have you seen that work?
Look, right across the board, I've seen successes of partnerships on every different level, whether it be policy, whether it be, financial outcomes, whatever the case may be. The thing with a true partnership is not only is it providing benefits on both sides, but it's sustainable, because you're going in with the right frame of mind to a mutual outcome. And, it's just so important that we see that partnerships can solve a lot of different problems. I've seen a lot of mistakes in partnerships where they've gone and gone, yes, we need to form a partnership here. It's all about me. That's not going to work. I've seen problems with partnerships where they haven't understood the other side of the coin and why they did what they did. I've seen partnerships fail because it's been driven by one particular element and not thought of across all different facets of what that was about. So, look, there's some great cases out there of, great things being done in a partnership setting. And, all you got to do is look at the bad cases where, it's everything from world wars right through to, simple things at local council level where people don't understand both sides. It can go very, very pear-shaped.
Yeah, so on the flip side, if we get shut down, we don't do anything about it, we don't open the conversation, we don't understand, and it happens again. I mean, the worst case is we get locked out. I mean, is there examples of that where organisations haven't done anything and just kind of tried to fly under the radar, and then all of a sudden they're not under the radar, they're on the radar and they're locked out?
Yeah, look, I'm fighting one at the moment. Well, I shouldn't say fighting one. There's one at the moment which is putting a bit of the fear of God into all states and territories, where one state has decided that they're not going to enable access to caving or quad biking or even anything to do with horses into any school in the state. Now, what that does is a ripple effect right across the whole country as other education departments go, well, why have they done that? Well, if that's going to solve our problem, let's do that too. So it's very much a copy and paste. And that's the worst case scenario. If you have a management plan that has outwritten any slacklining or highlining, then the next management plan that's written could be a copy and paste without really understanding the length of it or the implications of it. So, it's really important that we understand why these things take place, that we have then the opportunity to have those good discussions to be a lot more fruitful outcome.
So the copy and paste can work in both directions then, because we can work in the negative where we get written out of a plan and we don't start the conversation. So
Exactly.
This is why it's bad if we, I guess, don't get on the front foot then, because if we get a
That's
few
right.
negative outcomes written into it in a negative way in a few management plans, it'll kind of snowball copy and paste into the negative. Whereas if we hit the front foot, get ourselves written in the management plans in a good way, it'll copy and paste to the next one.
Potentially, absolutely. I always use the analogy of a complaint will get a lot more traction than a compliment. And it's purely, the frame of a human being tends to amplify negativity. So it gets a lot more traction that way. So as much as it could be complimenting, you'll find that the ones that are more on the negative side tend to get copy and pasted a lot more. But yes, you'd hope that once you're in, then you've got the arguments for future opportunities.
So it's sort of an important time for slacklining then, in that we're not kind of written into any at the moment. We can either get on the front foot and get written in a positive way, or we don't do anything and get written in a negative way.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I can't stress enough that data collection is first and foremost, what ASA should be really concentrating on. And then, yes, using that to then go in with these really key discussions.
And is data collection more important, say, than publicity and media, or is media not really useful in the positive and really only works in the negative? Or
if you don't have data, you won't get the next step towards anything that you gain from publicity. So getting publicity is seen on its own bullying tactics, because by getting into the space and going, how dare they shut us out of this, then you're not starting with a really good place for that. Yeah, you're not starting a good place for that partnership, because already, that's right. Correct. So PR is great when you've got the data and you've got the position, and it's as good as supporting an outcome as well as advocating for a better outcome. Use it to that benefit, it's not just about flying off a handle on negative stuff.
And so flying off handle on negative can be bad because it sort of becomes like we're at war with the authorities. And they're the people who actually want to go into bat for us.
Correct. That's exactly right. And they're going to be listening to the data, and that's what you think of any of the people that you deal with, say, for example, in national parks, they're going to have to respond to people above them. So give them the content that they can respond to up the chain. Because if you don't, well, then you're fighting a losing battle.
And when we say data, we mean how many people do the activity, such as slacklining, and what are the benefits of the activity to the community, to national parks?
Yeah, and that's the important part about those debriefs, because that'll quickly tell you what data you need. So, you mentioned before about the lookouts and people not liking the fact they're looking at someone on a high line. Well, is that right? What's the data that supports that? Yeah, combating that. So, okay, make a list of all the data you want to collect because of the circumstances that have arisen, and then start there.
And I guess if you bring that data in, it's not adversarial, because it's just facts. You sit down, you're like, well, here's what we found. And if you're authentic about it and bring in the negative as well as positive, then it shows you're being authentic for the conversation.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. And again, it starts that nice conversation about, okay, well, what was your aim in this? And, this is what we're here to present. That can help you still achieve your aim.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, yeah, this has been, I've learned a lot. I hope everyone that's listening has learned a lot. Is there anything we've missed that we should be talking about or should have said?
Good question. I'm probably a lot, but how about we start there, and I can always come back. And if you find that there's specific things that we'd like to concentrate on, I'm happy to support you. I think this is a great initiative by SA. Well done.
Cool, thank you. And so yeah, Outdoors New South Wales and ACT. Where do people go to find out more about that?
Great. It's just www.outdoorsnswact.org. That's our website. People want to become a member, just jump on to membership levels. You can go straight through there, and that'll give you access to the over 300 pages of content that we have for every one of our members. But no, that's great to be here, and yes, congratulations again on the new podcast.
Yes, thank you, and yeah, thank you for being a friend of Australian Slacklining and going into bat for us. So we look forward to working with you in the future.
Our pleasure. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Lori. You got a lot out of that chat with Lori Modde from Outdoor New South Wales ACT. If you did get a lot out of it, please share what you got out of it with your friends. Send them a text, send them an email, share it on social media, but not just a boring old share, a share with what you unexpectedly learned, what you found from that made it worth listening to. So thanks for your tuning in, and we've got a few more exciting episodes to come yet. So see you soon.